Okay, look, this is supposed to be a talk kind of about Agile, but I need to start a little off track here. Look, I'm going through a little bit of a breakup right now, and I just want to talk with you guys a minute about it. It's been a rough breakup. It's somebody I've been with for a long time, and it's just gotten to where I just don't feel comfortable in the relationship anymore. And look, before I let her know, I kind of wanted you guys to see the breakup letter and give me just a little bit of advice. So here's how it goes. So, dear Agile, the early days were fantastic. From the beginning, it looked like you and I really cared about the same things. You gave me permission to be myself, and I really liked that. Yeah, it's true that I did sometimes look outside of our relationship, sometimes, but you didn't seem to mind. You seemed okay with me bending your principles now and then, interpreting them in a way that best helped our relationship. Inspect and adapt, you always said. We built a lot of good software together, and I'm really proud of that. But lately, things seem to be getting out of control. You're out there spreading the word to others and saying things that make it really hard for me to do the right thing. Look, I try to explain to other teams that Agile doesn't really mean the only measure of progress is working software. I tell them you just say that because so many people get stuck in old design and requirements phases, and they forget that you learn a lot from just, you don't learn much until you start making something, and that's why Agile says that. Look, I try to explain to others that spending face time with end users and building simple prototypes that test our ideas is a good way to learn too. But other people explain to me that that's just not working software, and doing that is hurting our velocity. I try to explain to them that it's really good outcomes that customers want, not just more working software. But they tell me, Agile says we should be building what our customers ask for. It's not our fault if what they ask for is not what they need. I try to tell them that often our customers really need a time commitment, and that they won't get any benefit if they don't get something, if we don't get something to them on time. They tell me Agile doesn't do commitments, and Agile's about sustainable pace. At Agile, I really love all the good qualities, all your good qualities, but things have changed. There are more important things to me now. I've uncovered better ways of building software, and I'm sad to say that you just haven't. You haven't grown with me, and I'm sorry, Agile, but right now I just think we need some space. I think we should spend some time apart. With deepest love and respect, Jeff. I'm telling you this because it's become harder and harder for me to tell people I'm an Agile person. I've started to become a little bit embarrassed in my relationship, and I read in a magazine article, yes, it was a women's magazine, but that's an early warning sign of a bad relationship. And look, in the early days, it was easy to fall in love with Agile. I've been in software development 10 years before Agile, and I knew that every time I tried to follow a process, things kind of went bad, that if we focused on the people in our team and our skills, I knew that I failed at trying to write design documents before building things. In fact, it was building things that helped me figure out exactly what the design should be. So focusing on working software seemed to make a lot of sense. And I started by building software for customers and users that didn't work for my company. I learned the hard way that I had to spend a lot of time with them to really understand customers. That when they gave us their requirements, that wasn't always a recipe for success. And well, that responding to change thing just makes kind of perfect sense. All this Agile stuff made a lot of good sense. Now, but look, let's talk about Agile and her principles, and this is where things start to go wrong for me. And I start to look back at Agile principles, and I see people pounding this thing over and over, that our job is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And look, there's that working software thing, and well, I gotta tell you, I don't think it's software that makes people happy. Now, I've got to, yeah, some of you might know this. Look, I dropped this. Maybe it's it's just not your software that makes people happy. Maybe it's just not my software that makes them happy. It's probably me. But look, I've drawn this model a lot. I was here last year and I drew this same model, so I'll draw this really fast. I warn people over and over, it's not your job to build more software faster. It's, well, what we're in the business of, well, it's our job to change the world. Now, I'll tell people that because it sounds like it's big and important, and it sort of is important, but I don't mean world hunger and I don't mean the refugee crisis. I mean the part of the world that we can affect, the part of the world where there are people that buy and use and want to use our product. Now, this simple model starts by looking at the world now and looking at those people that might buy and use our product. And we'll find people that are unhappy and people that are worse than unhappy and people that are confused or frustrated. It's when we look at these people that we get ideas. Now, those ideas could be for whole new products, but if we're already in the product business, we've already got a piece of software out there somewhere, oftentimes therefore features or enhancements. Now, these are the things that we start calling our requirements at some point in time. That word always throws me a little bit because really these are, we call them requirements, but these are just another word for our ideas that we thought solved people's problems. I don't know that calling them a requirement makes the ideas any better. Now, whatever we do, even before Agile, we go through some process where we actually built something, and something came out, and that lands in the world later. And what we hope is that those people that were unhappy before are happy now. And because people are different, some people are less happy than others, some people there's no pleasing. Now, look, Agile, you keep talking to me about this working software stuff, but I know that everything between this idea and this delivery, well, that's just the output. Yeah, I heard Dan just talk about features, and yeah, it's features and products enhancements. You keep talking to me about velocity, you keep talking to me about working software, but look, I know that when I ask people, and if I asked any of you, if you were to tell me about a product that you really love, and I were to ask you why you love it, I'm pretty sure you're not going to tell me I love it because it was shipped on time, or I love it because it was cheap. Well, why people love things, and this is what I've learned, is they love it because whatever they were doing before that sucked, well, they can do it differently now. Things are better now. It's what happens when things come out that matters. And well, that's why we call this stuff outcome. And we don't measure it in terms of velocity or features shipped over time. We measure it in terms of how these people change their behavior. And I mean simple behavior changes like, well, the stuff that we can easily see. They buy or try or use our product. They do different things with it. They work differently than they did before. And it isn't just about, look, there are users that use our software, and those users maybe work for companies that buy our software, and then, well, all the way back here, there's us, there's our business, my company that has a vision for a product. We've got a strategy for how we think we'll get there. We've got metrics that may be going up or down or flat, and I've got stakeholders inside the organization that may not be very happy, and my stakeholders will tell me to focus on specific customers, and well, if a customer uses this product, they change their behavior. If one customer uses it, well, my stakeholders actually aren't too satisfied with that. If dozens do, if hundreds do, that's when it starts to matter. That's when these metrics inside my business start to go up. The word for that I'm going to use is impact. And we're talking about that a lot lately. We might measure impact in terms of, well, return on investment or market share. Now, the annoying thing here is all this stuff that happens after, it happens after. And I can't see it in a sprint review. I can't evaluate it myself. And in fact, it gets even worse than that. It doesn't just happen after. Sometimes it happens a long time after. I work with lots of different companies, and we measure. One of the things we focus on is measuring this stuff. And we don't just talk about it in a sprint review. We actually try and figure out how much outcome and impact we're getting. we'll use simple metrics funnels, where if we think about this product that ships, and we think about what happens, as a simple metrics funnel I use a lot, where we start by looking at acquisition. Do people acquire our product if it's a new product? Or look, if it's a feature, do they just see it and do they try it? The next step in this funnel is activation. Now, they might try it or go through first step through a workflow, but activation means they use it all the way through. Like if this was Facebook, for instance, acquisition might be signing up, and activation might be putting some stuff in my profile and putting a couple things on my wall, friending a couple people. Now that way I've really activated, not just signed up. Next step in this funnel is retention. Now retention means, well, to measure that retention thing, people have had to try it, go all the way through using it, and then come back weeks later, sometimes months later, and measure it. Now if this was Facebook, I might measure it next month, and I might say, okay, well, I think we've got that user. But look, some of the people I work with one company that makes software for business tax filing. They can't measure this retention stuff since it's quarterly. They can only measure retention every 6 to 9 months after releasing something. That's when they can start to see if this stuff has worked. That's when they start to look at this next thing in this funnel. That's revenue. Now, we might think of revenue as the money we make when we sell something, but these days, man, I work with digital software companies. They measure lifetime value of a customer, renewal rates. That's that revenue that we don't have to use sales and marketing to get that matters the most. And then finally, this last step of this funnel is referral. Do these customers try it, use it, keep using it, pay their license agreements, and tell other people? Do they tell other people they like it? Because that kind of puts people back in this funnel. That's free marketing. This is all the stuff that matters, and well, all this stuff takes a long time. When we talk about outcome and impact, well, the difference is time, and there are immediately measurable things that are outcomes here, but this impactful stuff, if that's the stuff that really matters, if that's where the business value or the return on investment comes in, I don't see that at the end of the sprint review. And Agile's just not telling me about this stuff. Agile's not telling us to pay attention to this stuff, and I keep having to tell people to pay attention to this stuff. Hey, have people seen this metrics funnel before? I know a lot of people have. This is called the pirate metrics funnel. Anybody, can you tell why it's called that? So I know people know. Because, so you can remember, the first letters are A, R, 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 which is what pirates say in English. I don't know what pirates say in German. Are there any German pirates? Or Vietnamese pirates. Look, this is a metrics funnel from McClure, and McClure is one of a bunch of product people that are talking about, well, what's really important to us if we're trying to launch a business, and what do we really need to pay attention to? And what's funny is the people that are really concerned with the product success aren't talking about velocity. They're talking about this stuff. And, well, this is where I start to look bad by talking about Agile. Agile's just not enough. Look, I think the primary measure of progress is not working software. I think the primary measure of progress is, well, for your customers and users, it's not working software, it's that outcome and impact stuff. That's what real progress is. If I were to tell that, it just doesn't work for me. If the primary measure of progress is working software, it's kind of like, look, if you run a restaurant that makes pizzas, if your primary measure of progress is pizzas you've made, might sound good, except if nobody comes to buy those pizzas and everyone hates them, then you just have a pile of pizzas. That's not a successful business. Now, look, Agile, you told me to pay attention. Well, we talk about satisfying the customer through early and continuous delivery, and we talk about business people and developers. And is the customer the business people? Is the customer the customer? Look, I know that when I worked with a team, I actually did have customers. And I could tell they were customers because they had money and they spent money with my company. But in my first encounter with Agile development, I was a product manager. And they kept telling me that I was the customer. And I said, I don't have any money to buy this stuff. I thought you were paying me. They said, no. In Agile, you're the customer. I said, no, customers are the ones that buy the product, and I have to go out and talk to them a lot. And they said, no, you have to stay here with the team. And I said, but how will I know what the customers want if I'm here with the team? How will the team know what they want if I stay here with the team? And this got really confusing for me, because sometimes customers, they're the ones that have money and they buy things, but they're not the same people as users. Users, well, if we're talking about a consumer product, users and customers may be the same people, but if we're talking about a big enterprise product, the people who make the buying decision, or the choosers, those are different people than the users. Now, look, Agile told me I need to pay attention to the business people, and I sort of knew that because they were the people that hired me. But look, in anybody who's worked with a business organization knows that they're a freaking mess. If we look at the business people inside there, I've got sales and marketing. I've got operations. I've got finance. I've got legal, and I've got a host of other characters that kind of make things rough for me. And none of these people seem to say that they want the same stuff. And if we're supposed to be satisfying them, is it them? Is it them? I'm just not sure. And look, I know that I've got the team that I'm listening to, and well, is it the team that's supposed to be listening to these people, or is it me that's supposed to be listening to these people? All this stuff was very confusing to me when I started working with Agile. And look, I just didn't get a lot of, well, where I got guidance, where I started to figure this stuff out, I often follow behind this guy named Marty Kagan. Marty Kagan came from the product world. He was one of the first product managers at Netscape, and when Netscape was sold to America Online, he went to this startup called eBay. At the time, eBay had 2 product managers, less than 100 people, and have you heard of Kagan?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Look, I follow behind Marty an awful lot, and Marty will talk an awful lot about this kind of person called a product manager. And a product manager, well, that's the person that kind of does sit at the center of this thing. That's their job, is to pay attention to the product and make sure everybody here is on the same page, to help lead, to help bring some coherence into everything that's going here. Marty would, in Agile, he would consider a product owner equivalent, a product manager equivalent to a product owner. But Marty will tell you that, look, if you're a product owner, it is your job to deliver a product that's an intersection of these 3 concerns. That product needs to be valuable. And by valuable, I mean valuable to these customers, valuable to these users, valuable to the business. And there's a lot of reconciliation to do that. To understand valuable, you need to understand all those groups. It needs to be usable, because if you come up with a cool idea that those users can't adopt and put into their work life, those customers won't get any benefit or value proposition, and that will ultimately tick off these people, because these people won't buy it, and there's a lot to that. And then finally, it needs to be feasible to build given the time and tools that we've got. Because look, any idiot can come up with fabulous ideas that we cannot afford to build. The right product is the one that's in the center there. The right product is the one that people want, people can use and incorporate in their work practice, and we can afford to build. Now, it's, to hit all those notes, you've got to have some knowledge of technology, some knowledge of users and the way they work, and a lot of knowledge of the market and your customers and users. And, well, Marty tells you you're on the hook for those things, but he doesn't tell you should work alone. He doesn't tell you there's one product owner or one product manager. He says if you're going to be successful at this, you better work very closely with someone who's a user experience person. Now, I hear the term BA a lot, and maybe that's a pinch hitter for someone who's a user experience person, but well, the product manager, that's the one that's responsible for this outcome and impact stuff. And in most organizations, I find that the BA isn't the one responsible for the success. It's, well, the BA trying to make sense of all these voices, and when possible, trying to talk to those people. The other person, if you're a product person, you've got to pay close attention to, is a lead engineer. someone who knows how to code, someone who knows about the code base we have today, someone who knows what's coming. When I follow behind guys like Marty, the first thing they do is break a lot of Agile patterns and say, look, what you need to have in place is a core product team. A core product team has somebody who is responsible, really does own those outcomes, and works closely with these other folks. Well, there's a company called Atlassian that makes this product called Jira. How many of you use Jira here? It's a lot of people. I should take a picture of that and send it to you. I visit Atlassian a couple times a year when I'll drop in on Sydney, and I remember one of the first times I walked around there, they were showing me where every dedicated product team sits, and the guy that was walking me around is a product manager of Confluence, and he says, this is where my team sits, and he said, this is where the triad sits. That's the jargon that they use there for this term. At Spotify, I was talking to people, and I've heard people referring to this as a trio. I've heard things like team of three. I've heard things like nucleus before. There's a lot of jargon terms for this. But look, it isn't just one person, and it isn't a business stakeholder. It's somebody who really understands what it's like to own a product and is accountable, responsible for that outcome and impact, and is an excellent collaborator. It's this core team that comes together to reconcile all these concerns. And when they do this stuff right, they're not they orchestrate collaboration. They're not a bottleneck for this stuff. They get the team directly in front of customers and users. They make sure that business people are heard from. It's a tough job. I couldn't quite see where it fit in this Agile stuff. Now, look, I want to get to the real heart of the matter here. I think I've got another 15 minutes or so. But I got to go back to this working software and this focus on delivery. That, look, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And look, I've already told you, I don't think that that's what they're looking for. I think they're looking for that outcome and impact stuff. And yes, it takes software to get there. You have to deliver something, but it's not deliver anything. And look, frequently is a thing. And then this paying attention to technical excellence stuff, well, there's a lot of things that make things bad about that for me. I want to show an example of a company I've worked with a little bit. This is a U.S. company called Nordstrom. And some people may have seen this Nordstrom iPad case study video. Who's seen this video before? So, look, just a few guys on the front. You guys can grab coffee if you want. Look, Nordstrom had an old school process. It was an old school Agile process. So the Nordstrom Agile process looked like this. It started with a business stakeholder who, Nordstrom is a large retailer, a retail department store, and they've got a lot of pressures on them to improve in the market, and they have a lot of digital assets. They have a website and mobile apps and lots of technology that operates stores. And if a stakeholder got an idea to improve things, well, their first step was to do this very traditional thing, this thing where I create a business case. Because, look, we should prove that there's some value in doing this. And when I create a business case, I describe that idea, and then I give some kind of estimate for what the upside is. I talk about the revenue. Now, it's important that this number have a lot of commas in it. So, in America, they don't use commas for decimal places, so that matters a lot. And then we have to also look at the cost, and we don't know very much about it. We know a little bit, but we need to come up with a rough number to get started. It's important that number not have very many decimal places in it, because if we have this revenue that's high and this cost that's low, we get this ROI stuff, and we need to say that there is some ROI in this, otherwise we can't possibly invest in it. Now, that clears a stage gate in their traditional process, and then they would go into kind of a design and requirements phase. Now, because they're using Agile processes, their new cool word for this is Sprint Zero. But the way this works is we talk a little bit more about that idea. We might figure out what the product looks like. We might do some work to design the UI. We might talk to customers and users. We might figure out what's going on in that UI, and then eventually break that UI down into smaller parts or things that we could build so that we can eventually estimate how long this is going to take. And then out of that whole process, we get this backlog thing. Now, it's in this design and requirements phase that the cost usually goes up, the return on investment never goes down. So long as these numbers are still positive, we can move forward with this. And then we move into an agile process where we'll cycle by cycle, iteration by iteration, sprint by sprint, we build some software and we eventually get enough built that we can ship it to the market. And then it lands in the market, customers and users are elated, and everything is awesome. Except when it's not. And a lot of times it gets there, and it's not that people hate it, it's just that they don't love it, they don't adopt it, they don't use it, because, well, we're relying on these people who get it, changing their behavior. We're relying on whatever you deliver them being better than what they had before. If you're building this to reduce cost, you're relying on it. Well, your guesses about what would work actually reducing cost, it just doesn't pan out. And, well, sometimes things would land in what I'm going to call the thud zone. I use this because a client of mine sent me an email message years ago that had the subject line of thud, and they were explaining to me what happened when they released their product. That's the sound their product made when it hit the market. We get the plus side, and then every once in a while we get this really awful side where things, we deliver something and it is so awfully bad that it hurts us. We have to roll it back, take it out, it costs us money, and we have to kill it and try and pretend it didn't happen. If we were to look at this model, I don't know if any of you have any anecdotal guess at how much lands in here versus here versus here. Now, I know I don't have any hard evidence. There's no data on this. No one publishes data on this. Most of the time people release stuff and they don't even measure all that stuff. But look, here's what my friend Marty told me. He said, look, if you're really good at this product management stuff, you will be right as much as 30% of the time. When I work with a lot of my clients that have strong data analytics, and I'll tell them, Marty is saying that if you were a product manager at eBay and you release something, the stuff you land will stuff you build may end up in the top about 30% of the time, but a great majority of the time it falls way below that. It just does not deliver anywhere near what you expected. And when I talk to analytics people, they say, 30% would be fabulous. We're nowhere near that. Maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 20, but we put features in the product and people just don't use them. Now, you guys are there were a lot of Jira users. Does Jira have a lot of features? Well, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you really love Jira? Where 5 is I really love it, 3 is that's okay, and 1 is I hate that we have to use Jira. Can you give me how much do you love Jira? 1, 2, 3? Now I really need a photograph of this. Apparently people are different because I see 1s and 3s, 1s, 2s, 3s, I see everything in there. So, look, it is proof that things are different. And companies like Atlassian went through lots of dropping features into their product and then finding out that, well, they just didn't go through this funnel quite right. A lot of them landed in this thud zone in the middle. So look, if I say 20 to 30% ends up there, and maybe 10 to 15% ends here, look, I'm going to say 60%-ish ends here. It means we are wrong a great majority of the time. I told you this story about Nordstrom because Nordstrom as a company started measuring, and they started holding these executives accountable for this business case. They started realizing these business cases weren't panning out. And what happened in Nordstrom was people stopped putting ideas into the hopper. look, if I'm a business person, I'm going to be held accountable for this, and I'm likely to be wrong. Why bother? What Nordstrom had, and what most Agile processes I see put into place, is what I'm going to call a pay-to-build cycle, where I operate on and I build those great ideas. What Nordstrom decided they needed was something a little bit different. They decided that what might be in order here is a pay-to-learn cycle. Pay-to-learn cycle, we once and for all acknowledge that this great idea that we had is a guess. And you know, when you build a business case, nowhere in the business case do you say guess. This is my guess. And you still can't say it. The cool word to say instead is hypothesis. That sounds sciencey. No one is going to say guess. But if I say it's a hypothesis, now I'm in the realm of science, and I really like what Dan said earlier, a good reminder, our goal is to disprove this, not to prove we're right, but prove we're not wrong, or prove we're wrong, actually. Embedded in this hypothesis are lots of assumptions, and my goal here is to say, look, of all those assumptions, what are the biggest, hairiest, nastiest ones? And what, in fact, would I need to learn in order to make sure that that assumption wasn't true? And if I was going to learn that, how would I measure it? And by measure it, I mean not just do a lot more research to make better guesses. I mean actually put something in front of customers and users that they could use. Now I don't mean working, testing software that scales out to thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. I mean simple prototypes, little things. And once I know how I'm going to measure this, I can then figure out what I'm going to build. Now, a lot of people will recognize this build, measure, learn cycle as a lean startup cycle. And if you look at the history of lean startup, that's the name of a book from a guy named Eric Ries, who was the CTO of a startup that landed right there, at least to start with. And he quickly learned that, well, he was using an Agile process, that there's something else working here. Nordstrom figured this out. I want to play this short video, and let me see if I can bring some things together here.
And this week's Innovation Lab is going to be building an iPad app with customer feedback as we go through the week. We wanted to work in the store to make sure that we were getting customer feedback as we worked, so that we were never working on anything that wasn't valued by the customer and only doing things that were delivering value. So we'll be building a feature and testing it until we get to the point where we have something that's good enough that we can just leave and leave the iPad app behind and have this new thing that customers can use. This is the world's first flash build. It's a flash mob where a software team shows up and builds an application in a surprise location. This is the Nordstrom Innovation Lab, and we're at the flagship store in downtown Seattle. Right now the team is just setting up their equipment to get started. We're going to build an iPad app that helps customers pick the best pair of sunglasses for them. We really don't know what the features are yet. We're going to use customer feedback as we go along throughout the day and the rest of the week in order to build the best thing.
So the next thing we're going to do is a user story map. So we're going to sit here and together outline all the steps that a customer would take, and actually even beforehand, how they buy sunglasses, like what are the different things that they might do, and how that process might change if we have this application. And we'll actually dig into what we have to build in order to support that process.
So now that we've done a card mapping, we're going to do a paper prototype. And this is something that we commonly do in the Innovation Lab. It's a great way to show what we'd like to do in a rough prototype that we can easily throw out, change, alter, based on feedback from the customers. I'll continue building individual paper slides, and our user experience specialist, Tel, will bring the prototype to a customer and say, okay, I have this app, and this is a paper version. I'd like you to kind of use it like you would normally use an app, and you can press things, interact with them, and then she'll change out the pages based on how the customer uses it. So it's a similar experience to the iPad, only an analog version.
So it's day 2, and we have our first working prototype of this app, and how it works is I take my first pair of sunglasses, put it on, picture, alright, and then I want to compare it to this other pair I've got right here. Put these on, and the picture, I can just hold these up like this and see which one I like better.
Well, Tel and Kim have been talking to people and doing paper prototypes. We've been coding, building an iPad. We take a stab at something, we look at the paper prototypes that Kim put together. We might take one at a time. Usually we come to the board and we grab the most important feature and we start implementing it. The really cool thing with this flash build is that we have actual real customers. Just today we delivered 4 or 5 different separate features, and I deliver it, swap the iPad with Tel. She'd go and talk to a customer, and 10 minutes later I had feedback from real customers about this thing that I delivered, and it changed how we did the next thing.
And it's been really, really great watching day to day what they've been doing, the team, to get all the feedback from the salespeople, the feedback the salespeople gather from the customers. And it's a really interesting process to kind of come in. On Tuesday, we had no idea what this would look like. There was an idea that somebody had to say, people take a lot of pictures of themselves with the sunglasses. It'd be cool if we could show them side by side to help them make the process better. And that was the idea, that was it. They came in, they had nothing built, and they've been building this literally on the spot throughout each day. And by now, we actually have an app, a functioning app that they can go through. It's very intuitive to help look at themselves and make the sunglass selection process easier, which is pretty cool to watch.
So yesterday, the sunglass buyer for Nordstrom came down to check out our progress, and she happened to put on polarized glasses and then held up the iPad in portrait view and was surprised that she couldn't see anything because it was black. And we figured out that polarization of the iPad running up and down and the polarization of the glasses running vertical cancel each other out. You don't see anything. But if you turn the iPad to landscape, you see perfectly fine because of the polarization of the 2 items lined up, and it's okay. So it was a pretty good find to be in the store, and she just happened to put on polarized glasses. And so today, first thing we're going to do is switch it to a landscape design and then lock in the aspect ratio of the iPad so customers and salespeople just naturally pick it up and use it in landscape and not try and go to portrait.
Okay, so I'm going to show you what we've been working on the last 5 days. We've added quite a few features over the week. You take a picture, multiple pictures of the customer, and then you pull them up. Tap the first one, you can see it larger, and then tap the second, and do a side-by-side comparison of each glass next to each other. We also added a feature where you can rename the picture, because we heard from salespeople, if a customer's trying on quite a lot of glasses, it's helpful to be able to know what order they were taken in, and also rename if you want with a brand or some distinguishing feature on the glass. Another feature we added was the ability to zoom. You can zoom in and really get a good detailed look at the frame side by side. Also, you'll see one of the pictures larger if you want to just better view of one frame. You can flip the camera view as well. Face it forward so the salesperson can take a picture of it like this, or you can flip the camera so take a picture of yourself facing forward. And then at the end of it all, we have a button called New Customer, which just erases all of the images and allows the salesperson to start with a new customer.
We're just trying to put the final touches on the app. Tel talked to a lot of users, and they said that when we went into the compare view, it was unclear where the pictures were coming from and which picture was which. So the animation here was trying to solve that problem, make it a little more clear what's going on. One of the challenges with software is when you're done, right? And I think the answer is really, it depends on how much time you have. At least the most important things got done. So this was time boxed to a week, and we did a week's worth of work, and it seems like what we have now is something that makes customers happy and addresses the main problems, and it's something that we can track, we have metrics on. So I think we're going to call that a day.
The application has to.
I'm going to stop it right there. I want to pull together a couple of points, and Kristen, I'm going to go a little bit over. Maybe, hopefully not too much. Make a point there. There was a core team there. The product manager was that guy named JB. He wasn't any one of a number of stakeholders you saw coming through there. It's JB's job to coordinate those. There were 2 UX people and 2 developers, and what they were focusing on wasn't agreeing on whether the acceptance criteria were right or whether those stories were done. They were trying to get this thing visible and demonstrable as soon as possible. They worked with stakeholders, customers, and users throughout that week. This is discovery work, not delivery work. What we're focused on here is learning fast. But learning work is never done. This work is time-boxed. It works differently. There's an old term we used to use in XP, the term spike. All this stuff is spikes, and this is the way that this works. Now we're building prototypes here, not potentially shippable software. The truth is at the end of the week they had a prototype. It was jankety, it was rough, it could not be installed, it did have bugs, but it was good enough to leave behind. In fact, if you're paying close attention, the first cycle around that build, measure, learn cycle, what they did on Monday was create a paper prototype. And what they learned is that paper wasn't the high enough fidelity for them to learn. And then they went to a prototype that was working software, but it doesn't meet all those technical requirements. I can promise you it was not built with behavior-driven development, nor did it have cucumber tests to support it, or any of that stuff. It was crap. Now, at the end of the day, this product did not go forward. The last guy to speak there was this guy named Jeremy, and he said, we've got something we can leave behind, and we've got metrics built in. They really needed to measure that outcome and impact. Did salespeople use it? Did customers buy it? Did it make a difference in sales? There were some more strategic concerns they had about brand and brand perception, things like that. They left it in there, and they let it run. At the end of the day, they figured out that, well, it wasn't going to be worth it to go through this pay-to-build cycle. They spent a week to build that and another few weeks of backing off and measuring it and letting things run, and they learned that it would have failed there. What Nordstrom learned is most things, and in most things they put into this pay-to-learn cycle, well, the failure rate in here is about the same as the failure rate of a startup. Pretty high, 90+% for them. So I can ask you, was that a success or a fail? Now, their only goal wasn't to build potentially shippable software or to ship anything. Their only goal was to learn. And when we remove the necessity of having something that we can ship and lots of users can use, when we leave on it just the necessity of just enough to learn, well, that changes things. Given the goal was to learn, that was a wild success because they learned. I'm going to clip one thing. There's a lot I could talk about here, but look, what's important to me when I'm using a process now is I've got two kinds of thinking that I focus on. Well, I'm glad that more and more we use the word discovery, but when I'm in discovery, I'm focusing on learning. And in fact, I'm focusing on my learning velocity. How fast can I learn? Sadly, there's no learning points like story points. I don't know how to point this stuff or measure it. But I've got this delivery track. And when I'm confident I'm building the right thing, yeah, I want to focus on delivery velocity. I want to focus on quality and predictability. When I'm in a learning mode, look, I want to pull things out of a pile of ideas or opportunities. I want to go around cycles to figure out what my hypothesis is. I want to build that, come up with that, and then I want to start doing lots of short little cycles to come up with tests. And when I'm confident that this is worth building, well, then I can use that product backlog thing, and I can start to put it on the left edge of a Kanban board that focuses on building software, or put it into the next sprint. The team can estimate it and take 2 weeks to build it because now we're confident. The problem is that this isn't a waterfall here. It shouldn't be. While we're doing this discovery work, well, we want to keep this discovery delivery work continuous, both things going on. While we're doing discovery work, well, there's delivery work going on for stuff that we were discovering before, and as soon as we finish this off, well, we've got to pick up a next opportunity and keep going with this. We want both these things. Now, what drives me a little bit crazy is in Agile development, everything going on here is almost always invisible to the team. And I work really hard to tell people it's not supposed to be that way. There are 2 tracks here, but we really want this to be one team. What I mean by that is, look, I know that the people doing discovery will have to drop down below into the delivery line and work with the team a lot, but it's time to start taking the developers and the testers and other people and getting them back in front of customers. It's time to start having them build prototypes. It's time to start having them brainstorm about what the right thing to build is. It's time to start pulling them above the line, not expect broken down stories and acceptance criteria. And once we start paying attention to both, once we start talking about discovery work in the sprint planning meeting, once we start talking about discovery work every day in the daily stand-up, once we start talking about what we learned in discovery at this sprint review and the stakeholders, Once we start giving it the same level of visibility and transparency we do the delivery stuff, we start to notice, well, we start to be okay with this idea of ebb and flow. That when we've got a new idea, sometimes we spend a lot more time iterating and discovery, and sometimes when we really got it nailed, we can move down in delivery, and we get this, well, back and forth here. We know that there's some discovery work and that there's some delivery work, and when we're heads down focusing on learning as fast as we can, well, that delivery velocity is going to go down. But when we really got it nailed, that delivery velocity will go up. If we've only got visibility to half of it, it really just looks like we're kind of unpredictable. And once we get the visibility into all of it, we start to become okay with it. Look, let me put my last slide up here to give some points. More and more, I can't position what I'm talking about to other people as Agile because it comes with too many preconceived notions. More and more, I kind of have to say, well, what we're doing is just sensible software development here. I want to make sure that teams organize around products and the vision for the products. I want to make sure that they actually get out and start talking with customers and build empathy and understanding. I want to make sure that people actually validate their ideas before they start investing in building full-fledged scalable stuff. I want to make sure that there's some balance, that discovery isn't the junk that the product owner and a couple of people helping them try and fit in between the cracks. It's something we all worry about. And I want to make sure that we don't fire and forget, just drop things in the market and hope they turned out okay, because it takes weeks, months, quarters to measure if those outcomes were good. It's the working software thing, I guess. Look, stop celebrating delivery, start celebrating genuine outcomes. I think that's where the value is. 6 minutes, 57 seconds over. Thank you very much for listening. You should get some coffee, and if you want to ask questions, you got to ask me after the fact. Thank you very much.